It's strange how certain dates get burned into your memory, not because they're supposed to be celebrated, but because they end up marking the moment your whole life splits into a before and after. For me, that date is May 14th, 2021. The night that was meant to celebrate 10 years of love, laughter, and the kind of commitment you imagine only exists in cheesy rom-coms, turned into a spectacle of betrayal and humiliation, but not for me, for them. But before I get to that night, I need to pull you back into my life as it was in the years leading up to it. Because nothing like that just happens out of nowhere. There are always little cracks forming, hairline fractures you don't want to admit are there, until the whole thing collapses under your feet. My name's Daniel Carter, born in 1988 in Boston. By the time 2011 rolled around, I was 23, just out of college, carrying the naive belief that I had my whole life ahead of me and all the answers already figured out. That's when I met Emily. Emily Parker, brown hair, blue eyes, that kind of magnetic smile that made you forget whatever you were worried about. We met at a friend's barbecue, one of those humid summer evenings where everyone's sticking to plastic chairs and cheap beer is being passed around. She laughed at one of my stupid jokes, and I swear that laugh stitched itself into my chest. By the end of the night, I'd asked for her number, and by the end of the month, we were inseparable. The early years with Emily felt like living inside a song. Like every ordinary thing, driving around town, cooking pasta in our crappy first apartment, binging The Office on a laptop felt extraordinary because it was with her. She worked in graphic design, and I was grinding my way up in IT support, eventually moving into cybersecurity. We weren't rich, but we were happy, or at least I thought we were. I've always believed that friendships are the backbone of life. My best friend, Matt Donovan, had been around since high school. He was the guy who'd seen me through every heartbreak, every dumb mistake, every late-night fast food run. The kind of guy who could walk into my parents' house without knocking. Emily and Matt got along easily. Too easily, maybe, but at the time I thought it was perfect. The three of us became this unshakable triangle, spending weekends together at Sox games, going on hikes, sharing holidays. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was to the signs. Emily started picking up new hobbies that didn't involve me, things that somehow Matt also found an interest in. Running, for one. I was never a runner. I hated it. But Emily suddenly loved it, and somehow Matt became her running partner. At first I encouraged it. It's great you two have that, I remember thinking. I told myself I didn't need to feel left out, that I was just being secure, mature. I didn't want to be that jealous guy, but little things started nagging at me. Nights when Emily would come home later than usual, saying she and Matt grabbed a bite after their run. Inside jokes that popped up between them when we were all hanging out. Texts she'd get and quickly swipe away. I brushed it all off. I told myself, you're paranoid, Danny. Don't ruin something good because of your insecurities. That's the thing about betrayal. It feeds off trust. It hides in the comfort of your certainty until the truth smashes through like a wrecking ball. By 2018, Emily and I were married. A small ceremony on Cape Cod, barefoot in the sand, with Matt standing beside me as my best man. I can still remember the way he clapped me on the back that day, telling me I was the luckiest guy alive. I had no reason not to believe him. Life after the wedding settled into a routine. We bought a modest house in the suburbs, nothing flashy, just a 2-bedroom place with a yard big enough for barbecues. I was climbing the ladder at work, pulling in more money than ever, and Emily's design projects were steady. From the outside, we were that picture-perfect couple you see on Instagram. Vacations in the Caribbean, cozy Christmas photos, lazy Sundays in sweatpants. But by 2020, the cracks were spreading. The pandemic hit, and suddenly we were trapped in the same four walls. At first, I thought it would bring us closer. Instead, I noticed Emily pulling further away. She was on her phone constantly, claiming she was just keeping up with friends. She spent hours in the spare bedroom, working on projects, while I was downstairs trying to keep the house in order. And Matt? Well, he was always around. Even during lockdowns, somehow he was still helping out. He dropped off groceries, came over for backyard beers when restrictions eased, texted both of us daily. It was easy to justify. He was family, basically. I told myself I was lucky to have a wife and a best friend who got along so well. But then there was the night in October 2020. Emily had left her laptop open on the couch. I wasn't snooping, not really. I just went to close it, and there it was, her messenger app wide open. I saw Matt's name. I saw a message from him that read, "Last night was amazing." Can't stop thinking about it, I froze. My brain short-circuited. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. For a second, I convinced myself maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe they were talking about a movie, or some memory, or... God, I don't even know what excuse I was reaching for. But then I scrolled up, just a little, and the words cut me like glass. Explicit. Undeniable. Betrayal spelled out in black and white. I closed the laptop so hard it made a snapping sound. My first instinct was to confront her right then, to scream, to demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe denial, maybe the sick hope that if I didn't say anything, it would somehow undo itself. Instead, I went upstairs, lay next to her sleeping body, and stared at the ceiling all night, trying to swallow the truth that the two people I loved most in the world were stabbing me in the back. Over the next weeks, I became an actor in my own life. Smiling, laughing, pretending, but inside I was hollowed out. Every touch from Emily felt like poison. Every text from Matt felt like mockery. I was drowning in a sea of lies, and yet I couldn't bring myself to explode. Then came the idea. The anniversary party. Our 10th year together was coming up in May 2021. Emily had been talking about it for months, how she wanted to host something special at our place, invite family and friends, make it this huge celebration. And as she spoke, a seed planted itself in my mind. If they wanted to play me for a fool, if they wanted to dance around in their secret little world, then maybe the stage I'd give them would be big enough for everyone to finally see. I started planning quietly, gathering evidence. I became a detective in my own marriage, collecting screenshots, recording late-night whispers on my phone, piecing together the puzzle until there was no room left for doubt. It destroyed me, each discovery like another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. But it also fueled me. The pain sharpened into purpose. In the weeks leading up to May, I rehearsed it in my head. How I'd stand there, how I'd reveal it all, how their faces would crumble under the weight of the truth. It was cruel, maybe, but it was the only way I felt I could reclaim my dignity, to stop being the quiet victim in a story I didn't ask to be written into. By the morning of May 14th, the house was spotless, decorated with fairy lights and fresh flowers. Emily was radiant, buzzing with excitement, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Guests began arriving, friends, family, co-workers, all dressed up, all smiling, all toasting to what they thought was a milestone of love. And me? I stood there with my champagne glass, smiling that same practiced smile I'd worn for months, my stomach twisting into knots. Because I knew this wasn't going to end the way anyone expected. And as the night stretched on, with laughter echoing through the rooms and everyone raising their glasses in our honor, I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it. The setup was complete, the stage was ready, and I was about to burn it all down. The thing about throwing a party is that everyone's eyes are already on you. They're watching, waiting, expecting the happy couple to be the centerpiece of the night. It gave me the perfect cover. Nobody questioned why I looked a little pale, why my hands shook slightly as I poured drinks, why my smiles didn't quite reach my eyes. They assumed I was just emotional, maybe overwhelmed by the milestone. Emily was in her element. She wore this navy blue dress I'd bought her the previous Christmas, the one she'd said made her feel unstoppable. Her hair was curled, her makeup perfect, her laugh filling every corner of the house. She floated from guest to guest, accepting compliments, leaning into me for photographs, squeezing my hand as if she really believed everything she was projecting. That's what made it worse, how convincing she was. To everyone else, she was the devoted wife. To me, she was a stranger playing dress-up with my life. And then there was Matt. He showed up late, which in hindsight felt like another slap in the face. When he finally walked in, he was wearing his usual casual swagger, as if he owned the place. He hugged me, clapped me on the back, called me bro. I nearly gagged at the sound of his voice. Emily lit up when she saw him, though she masked it quickly. I noticed, though. God, I noticed every flicker of her eyes, every stolen glance. I'd invited nearly 50 people, family, co-workers, a handful of old college friends, even my boss. It wasn't because I wanted a massive celebration. No, it was because I wanted witnesses. If I was going to do this, if I was going to detonate my marriage in the most spectacular way possible, I wanted an audience large enough that there would be no denial, no rewriting of the truth. All evening I could barely taste the food. The catered spread of hors d'oeuvres, the roast chicken, the endless bottles of champagne. It might as well have been cardboard. My mind was on one thing, the speech. I'd prepared it for weeks, rehearsed it in the bathroom mirror late at night when Emily was asleep. I knew the beats, the pauses, the inflection. It wasn't just a speech. It was an execution. Around 9 o'clock, after most people had eaten and the music had mellowed into a soft background hum, I tapped my glass with a spoon. The room hushed almost instantly. All eyes turned to me. Emily, glowing with champagne and adoration, slipped her arm through mine and gave me that look, the look of a woman proud of her husband, expecting some heartfelt words about love and longevity, and I gave them that. At first, I started with gratitude, thanking everyone for coming, talking about how much these 10 years had meant, how Emily had been my partner, my confidant, my rock. I saw people nodding, smiling, some even tearing up. Emily squeezed my hand tighter, her smile wide, her eyes glistening. And for a fleeting second, I almost lost my nerve. Almost. But then I thought of the messages. The ones where she told Matt how much better he made her feel than I ever could. The ones where he promised her a future behind my back. The photos she'd sent him. The sound of her voice recorded in whispers, saying his name in a way she hadn't said mine in years. My chest tightened. My throat went dry. But I pushed on. I shifted gears. I told everyone how much I valued honesty in a marriage, how trust was the foundation of everything Emily and I had built. And then I paused, let the silence stretch, let the weight of my words settle over the room. People looked at me curiously, their smiles faltering. Emily's grip loosened on my arm. Then I said it. Plain, direct, undeniable. That my wife had been cheating on me. That my best friend, the man standing right there in the room, was the one she'd been doing it with. You could have heard a pin drop. Emily gasped, her face draining of color. She stammered something, but I kept going. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the Bluetooth speaker, and hit play. The room filled with their voices, their laughter, their moans. Gasps erupted. Someone dropped a glass. My aunt covered her mouth with her hands. My boss shifted uncomfortably, his face twisted in shock. Emily lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. I had more. Screenshots printed and tucked neatly into an envelope. I tossed them onto the table in the center of the room, where curious hands snatched them up. Gasps turned into whispers, whispers into angry murmurs. Matt's face went from cocky confidence to pure panic. Emily started crying, begging, saying it wasn't what it looked like. Matt tried to say I was overreacting, that it was just a mistake, but the evidence was undeniable. The room was no longer on their side. I stood there shaking, adrenaline coursing through me. My hands trembled, my chest heaved, but I kept my voice steady. I told everyone how I'd discovered the truth, how long it had been going on, how the two people I trusted most had been lying to me for years, and then I said the line I'd rehearsed 100 times. So tonight, on our anniversary, I'm not celebrating love. I'm burying it. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. And then slowly people started moving. Some left the room entirely, unwilling to be part of the scene. Others stayed, watching the train wreck unfold. My mother glared at Emily like she was something foul scraped off a shoe. My father shook his head in disgust. Emily crumbled, sobbing, begging me to stop, saying we could work it out. But the look on her face wasn't one of love, it was fear. Fear of losing the image, the reputation, the life she'd built on lies. Matt stood there, stiff and silent, eyes darting to the exits like he was planning his escape. I felt strangely detached, like I was floating above it all, watching myself burn down my life in real time. But underneath that detachment was a raw, searing pain, the kind that steals your breath and makes you wonder if you'll ever feel whole again. The party dissolved after that. Guests trickled out, some giving me sympathetic pats on the shoulder, others shaking their heads at the spectacle they'd just witnessed. By the time midnight rolled around, the house was nearly empty. Just me, Emily, and the echo of everything I'd destroyed. Emily tried to talk to me to explain, but I couldn't hear her. Her words were just noise. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and collapsed onto the bed. For the first time in months, I felt a twisted sense of relief. The secret was out. The weight wasn't mine alone to carry anymore, but relief is a cruel, fleeting thing. Because as the adrenaline drained from my body, what replaced it was devastation. The woman I'd built my life with, the man I'd trusted like a brother, they weren't mine anymore. They never had been. I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up, wondering how I'd ever pick up the pieces of what was left. That night was the breaking point. The moment everything I thought I knew about my life shattered. And as much as I wanted to believe the worst was behind me, I was about to learn that the fallout, the aftermath of public betrayal, was a whole different kind of hell. The morning after the anniversary party, I woke up to silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. The house still smelled faintly of wine and catered food, the remnants of a night that was supposed to celebrate 10 years of marriage but instead tore my life to pieces. Downstairs, there were half-empty glasses scattered across tables, abandoned plates with scraps of food, and wilted flower petals on the floor. It looked like a battlefield after a war, and in a way, that's exactly what it was. Emily was gone. I didn't know if she'd left during the night or early that morning, but when I checked the driveway, her car was missing. A part of me was grateful. I didn't think I could handle her presence right then. My head was pounding, my stomach knotted, and my heart felt like it had been put through a shredder. I thought I'd feel some satisfaction, maybe even triumph, after exposing them the way I did. But what lingered was emptiness. Yes, I had taken control of the narrative, ripped the mask off their lies in front of everyone. But now what? I was still alone, still betrayed, still standing in the ruins of a marriage and a friendship I had built my adult life around. By noon, the calls started. First from my mother, who said she'd never been prouder of me for standing up for myself, but also asked if I realized how brutal that scene had been. She was torn between admiration and concern. Then my sister called, furious, not at me, but at Emily. She ranted for 20 minutes about how she'd always suspected Emily wasn't right for me, how Matt had always been too slick for his own good. It should have comforted me, but it didn't, and then came the texts. My phone lit up with messages from friends, co-workers, even distant relatives who had already heard what happened. In the age of smartphones, you can't expect an event like that to stay private. People filmed. People shared. Within hours, my humiliation and revenge had traveled beyond the walls of my house. Some called me brave. Some said it was cruel to expose them in that way. Others just wanted the gossip. That was the first time it hit me. This wasn't just my private pain anymore. It was public, and I couldn't control how people perceived it. Work became unbearable. On Monday, walking into the office felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone already knew my lines. My coworkers gave me sympathetic smiles, pats on the shoulder, awkward silences when I entered the break room. My boss called me into his office and told me to take time off if I needed it. I appreciated the gesture, but it only reinforced the reality that my personal implosion was bleeding into every corner of my life. Nights were the worst. The bed felt like a cavern without Emily in it. And even though I hated her for what she did, my body still expected her warmth beside me. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, it was broken by nightmares. Images of Emily and Matt together, laughing at me, whispering about me, making a fool out of me in my own home. Matt tried calling me once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice shaky, saying he was sorry, that it just happened, that he never meant to hurt me. I deleted it before he finished. Hearing his voice made me want to put my fist through a wall. Emily's approach was different. She sent long emails begging me to meet her, insisting that we could work through this. She claimed it wasn't as serious as it looked, that she still loved me, that Matt didn't mean what he said in those messages. Reading her words made me sick. They weren't apologies. They were attempts to rewrite reality. I couldn't stomach it. Divorce papers felt inevitable, but even that process was slow, agonizing. Lawyers, paperwork, financial discussions. It all forced me to engage with her when all I wanted was to erase her from my life. Splitting the house, the savings, the furniture. It was like cutting our life apart with a dull knife. Each slice reopening wounds, and the thing nobody prepares you for is how betrayal doesn't just destroy the relationship. It poisons everything around it. Friends chose sides. Some cut ties with both Emily and Matt entirely, disgusted by what they did. Others tried to stay neutral, which felt like another betrayal in itself. Mutual friends became awkward encounters, strained phone calls, half-hearted attempts at maintaining connections that no longer had a foundation. I started drinking more than I should. Whiskey became my nightly companion, dulling the sharp edges of my thoughts just enough to get me through the hours until I collapsed into restless sleep. I told myself it was temporary, just a way to cope. But deep down, I knew I was spiraling. By June, a month after the party, I'd lost nearly 15 pounds. My clothes hung looser, my face was gaunt, and my coworkers started commenting on how tired I looked. I brushed them off, but inside I felt like a hollow version of the man I used to be. I tried therapy. My sister practically forced me into it, saying I needed professional help to process everything. I sat in a beige office across from a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a notebook, spilling out fragments of my story while she nodded thoughtfully. At first it felt pointless. Talking didn't erase the images from my mind or fill the empty bed at night. But over time I started to realize that I wasn't just grieving Emily. I was grieving the version of myself that believed in her. The version of me that believed Matt would always have my back. The betrayal had cracked something fundamental in me. Trust. It wasn't just Emily I doubted now. It was everyone. I found myself second-guessing every smile, every promise, every word people said. If the two people I trusted most could deceive me so thoroughly, how could I ever trust anyone again? 4th of July rolled around, and I spent it alone on my back porch, watching fireworks explode in the distance while nursing a bottle of beer. The neighborhood kids screamed and laughed, couples kissed under the bursts of color, families gathered around grills. I sat in the dark, a silent spectator, wondering how long it would take before life felt normal again, or if it ever would. Meanwhile, Emily and Matt didn't fade away like I wanted them to. Word got back to me that they were still seeing each other, though less openly now. That knowledge burned like acid. Not only had they betrayed me, but they were continuing, as if my pain was just a speed bump in their story. It made me furious, but it also made me feel powerless. I had exposed them, humiliated them, but they still had each other. The fallout wasn't just external, it was internal too. I questioned myself endlessly. Was I not enough? Did I miss something obvious? Was there something inherently flawed in me that made her look elsewhere? That made my best friend cross a line he should never have crossed? These questions haunted me, gnawed at me, kept me awake at night. There were moments when I thought about reaching out to Emily, not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted answers. Real answers. But I knew deep down there were none that would satisfy me. Betrayal doesn't have a neat explanation. It's selfishness, weakness, lust. Pick your poison. None of it would make the pain any less. By August, I hit rock bottom. One night, after too many drinks, I found myself scrolling through old photos of Emily and me, our wedding day, our vacations, our Christmas mornings. My vision blurred with tears, and I realized I was clinging to ghosts. She wasn't that woman anymore. Maybe she never was. That was the moment I decided something had to change. I couldn't keep living in the ruins. The fallout had consumed me for months, and if I didn't find a way to reclaim some part of myself, I'd drown in it. So I started small. I quit drinking for a while. I joined a gym, forcing myself to show up even when I didn't want to. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage, people who reminded me who I was before Emily. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was something. Still, the anger simmered. Healing was one thing, but part of me wasn't ready to just move on. Part of me wanted them to feel the kind of devastation they'd left me with. And as the summer bled into fall, that part of me grew louder, sharper, more determined. The fallout had nearly broken me, but it also lit a fire. And by September, I knew I wasn't done. Not yet. By the time September rolled around, the haze of shock and grief had started to clear, replaced by something colder, sharper, more deliberate. The fallout had left its mark, but it also revealed a truth I'd been ignoring. I wasn't going to let Emily and Matt get away with what they had done. Not just emotionally, but publicly, morally. I wanted accountability, not just for me, but for the people around them who had once trusted them too. I started quietly. I didn't announce my intentions to anyone. I didn't post on social media, didn't send emails. I just observed. Emily had gone back to her freelance work, sending her designs to clients with that same flawless, polished professionalism she always had. Matt was still in town, still pretending that nothing had happened, still showing up to mutual friend gatherings, still holding the same smug, confident demeanor that had once made me tolerate him. But I noticed their little habits, the ones people never see. The hurried glances at their phones when they thought I wasn't looking. The way they'd suddenly change conversation topics when my name came up. I cataloged it all, quietly, like a detective, like a man sharpening a knife he intended to use at exactly the right moment. Then I started planning. Not impulsively, not like the party, but carefully, methodically. I wanted precision. I wanted them to understand fully that betrayal comes with consequences. And I knew exactly how to do it. First, I built a digital dossier. Emails, texts, photographs, timestamps, all documented meticulously. I learned enough about metadata to know when a photo was taken, where a message had originated, and how to present it as undeniable proof. I created files that could be printed, shared, or projected. I wasn't going to rely on the word of anyone else. I needed irrefutable evidence. Then I turned my attention to timing. I knew the holiday season would bring them together in ways I could predict. Office parties, mutual friends get-togethers, the subtle obligations of social life that neither could escape. I waited for the perfect moment, a setting where I would have an audience, and they would be completely unprepared. By late November, I had everything in place. My former wedding anniversary venue, a small cozy event space in downtown Boston, was booked under the guise of a Friendsgiving celebration I was hosting for my circle of close friends. Invitations were sent, casual, cheerful, unsuspecting. Emily and Matt RSVP'd almost immediately, eager to mingle with our mutual acquaintances, unaware that I had orchestrated this entire gathering as a stage for revelation. As the day approached, my nerves were taut. I felt the old familiar adrenaline, that same sharp metallic pulse I'd felt the night of the anniversary party. Only this time it wasn't anger blinding me, it was clarity. I was calm, I was precise, and I was in control. The day arrived. The space smelled faintly of baked goods and roasted turkey, candles flickering along the tables. Guests arrived, greeted me warmly, oblivious to the drama about to unfold. Emily arrived an hour later, radiant in a burgundy dress, her hair perfectly straightened. She waved at people, smiled, laughed, the picture of confidence. Matt trailed behind, wearing a casual blazer, looking relaxed and smug. I watched them both, the heat in my chest simmering, and then waited for the right moment. It came during dinner. I had carefully arranged the seating so that Emily and Matt were sitting directly across from me. I clinked my glass, calling for attention, and the room quieted instantly. This was no longer a casual friendsgiving. It was a stage, a spotlight on their deceit. I began with a toast. I spoke of friendship, trust, and loyalty, the virtues we all claim to uphold but so often fail to. I talked about the importance of honesty, of integrity, of standing by those we love. And then, as the room leaned in, thinking it was just a sentimental speech, I shifted. I mentioned betrayal. Subtly at first, almost in passing, but heavy enough for them to feel the weight. I watched Emily's smile falter. I saw Matt tense, his fingers tightening around his fork. The guests looked puzzled, sensing something unsaid but palpable. Then I revealed the first piece of evidence, a printed screenshot, carefully highlighted. I held it up so everyone could see. Their messages to each other explicit, undeniable. Gasps rippled through the room. A few friends leaned forward, incredulous, murmuring to each other. Emily's face went pale and Matt's jaw clenched. But I wasn't done. I had more, photos, metadata, a short video clip of them together in a way they thought no one would ever see. One by one I revealed them, walking the room through the trail of deceit. The room reacted exactly as I had imagined, shock, anger, whispers, judgment. Emily's hands shook. Matt's face twitched with a mixture of fury and fear. I could feel their panic radiating, but it was muted by the stunned silence of everyone else. And then I delivered the coup de grace. I didn't just expose them privately. I projected a slideshow on the wall behind me, each image paired with timestamps, locations, and brief captions summarizing the betrayal. It wasn't cruel. It was factual, methodical, undeniable. I wasn't destroying them with exaggeration. I was destroying them with truth. I watched Emily sink lower in her chair, shoulders slumped, mouth opening and closing without words. Matt avoided my gaze, staring down at the table like a man who'd just been caught in a trap he had no hope of escaping. The room was silent, save for the soft shuffle of chairs and the occasional sharp intake of breath. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Satisfaction because they could no longer hide, Emptiness because this was my life, and it had been irrevocably changed. But mostly I felt power. The kind of power that comes from reclaiming control after being utterly powerless for months. The guests were whispering now, some taking photos of the projected evidence, others murmuring their support. My friends who had doubted me during the initial fallout finally saw the truth laid bare. They nodded at me, their eyes saying, "We see you. We believe you." Emily finally spoke, though her voice was barely audible over the murmurs. She tried to plead, to justify, to twist the narrative, but no one was listening. The evidence spoke louder than her words ever could. Matt attempted to argue, but his protestation sounded hollow, defensive, ridiculous in the face of irrefutable proof. I had expected some confrontation, maybe even physical anger, but they were beaten. Not physically, but morally. Their deception had been laid bare for everyone who mattered, and the shame was immediate, visceral. After what felt like an eternity, I sat back down, letting the silence settle. Emily avoided my gaze entirely. Matt didn't even try. They had no words, no defense, no excuses left. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and I felt a quiet, almost eerie calm. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I didn't relish their humiliation in a way that would make me cruel. I simply let the evidence exist. That was enough. Truth, fully exposed, has a way of speaking for itself. By the end of the evening, most guests had left, shaken but supportive. Emily and Matt departed quietly, avoiding me entirely. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The work was done. The exposure was complete. Walking through the empty space afterward, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and liberation. The process had drained me, emotionally and physically, but it had also restored something vital, my sense of self. I hadn't needed revenge and the petty sense of humiliation for its own sake. I had needed closure, accountability, and a reclamation of my dignity. And I had achieved that. The months that followed were not easy. Emily and I finalized the divorce. Matt moved out of town shortly after, and I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I threw myself into work, into friendships, into fitness, into anything that reminded me that I could survive, that I could be whole again. But the turning point, the moment when I realized I didn't have to be a victim anymore, when I could reclaim my agency, came that night, during that carefully orchestrated exposure. That was when I understood that betrayal, no matter how deep or cruel, doesn't have to define you. It can shape you, teach you, sharpen you, and ultimately empower you if you refuse to let it break you completely. For the first time in over a year, I felt a sense of control, a sense of agency, a sense that I could dictate the narrative of my own life. That night, standing in that quiet, empty room, I promised myself that I would never allow anyone to wield power over my trust again. The weeks and months after that night blurred into a strange rhythm of rebuilding and reflection. The firestorm I had unleashed on Emily and Matt had done its work, but it hadn't magically healed me. There were mornings I still woke up with that tight, hollow feeling in my chest. Afternoons when a random memory would strike like a cold slap, and nights when the silence of my apartment felt heavier than it had ever felt with her lying next to me. But gradually, the weight began to lift. I started filling the spaces they had left with things that belonged only to me. I painted the walls of our old bedroom a soft gray, the color I had always liked but Emily had hated. I hung a few abstract canvases I'd bought over the years, pieces I never had the courage to display because they didn't match her taste. I made my bed in the mornings and brewed my coffee exactly the way I liked it. Black, no sugar, no cream. These small acts felt insignificant at first, but they were the building blocks of reclaiming my life. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during the years of my marriage. A Friday night at the local pub turned into an impromptu game night with my college roommates, and I laughed harder than I had in months. The sound of real, unguarded laughter reminded me that life still had joy in it, that happiness wasn't an illusion tied to someone else's actions. I also started dating again. At first it was tentative, awkward, and riddled with self-doubt. I questioned whether I could ever trust anyone fully again, whether I could let someone else into the parts of me Emily and Matt had so brutally violated. But slowly I learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was survival. There were moments of hesitation, moments when a lingering memory of betrayal made me recoil, but they became fewer, smaller, and easier to acknowledge without letting them define me. Work became a refuge. I threw myself into projects I'd been postponing for years. I volunteered for high-stakes cybersecurity cases, mentored younger colleagues, and even took on speaking engagements. I realized that in exposing Emily and Matt, I had rediscovered a part of myself that thrived on discipline, focus, and clarity. My career wasn't just a paycheck anymore. It was a canvas, a space where I could demonstrate my competence and integrity without fear of deceit. One evening, about 6 months after the Friendsgiving reveal, I found myself walking through the Boston Common. The air was crisp with early winter chill, the trees stripped bare, branches reaching skyward like skeletal hands. I thought about the past year, the betrayal, the party, the long nights, the therapy sessions, the slow crawl back to normalcy. I realized that while I had lost Emily and Matt, I hadn't lost myself. That realization hit me harder than anything else had in months. It was grounding, quiet, yet profoundly powerful. And then, unexpectedly, I felt something else, an almost imperceptible weight lifting. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need the validation of exposing them because I had already given it to myself. Their humiliation was no longer about them. It was about me reclaiming the dignity and autonomy that had been stolen. I also began to understand something crucial. Betrayal leaves scars. Yes, but scars are proof that we survived, proof that we endured. My scar wasn't just the memory of Emily and Matt. It was every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of self-doubt I had overcome. I realized that the story of their betrayal could have defined me, but I refused to let it. Instead, it became the story of my survival, of my reclamation of agency in a life I thought had been stolen from me. By the next spring, I had moved into a new apartment, smaller, but filled with sunlight, plants, and books. I had restructured my life, both physically and emotionally. I still saw Emily occasionally, through mutual friends or social media, but it no longer hurt. I watched her rebuild her life same as I had, and felt no desire to interfere. The anger that once burned so brightly had cooled into a steady resolve, like embers beneath the surface. Matt had left Boston entirely. I heard through the grapevine that he was trying to start fresh somewhere else, hoping the past wouldn't follow him. Part of me felt satisfaction, another part felt pity. It was strange how the people who had caused me so much pain were now minor characters in a story that was primarily about me. I also discovered that the act of reclaiming my life had unexpected benefits. Relationships I had neglected were revived. Friends I had taken for granted became pillars of support. I was learning to trust again, carefully, cautiously, but genuinely. And in that, there was a kind of joy I had forgotten existed, steady, understated, and completely my own. I began to write about my experience, not as a form of therapy alone, but as a way to process the lessons I had learned. The betrayal had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about trust, loyalty, and self-respect. By putting those experiences into words, I found a new clarity. I wrote about the pain, the humiliation, the anger, and also the resilience that emerged from it. Writing became a mirror, reflecting not just my suffering, but the strength that had grown from it. Months turned into a year, and eventually, I found a rhythm that felt sustainable. Life had not returned to what it was before Emily and Matt, nor did I want it to. What had been lost couldn't be reclaimed, and I didn't need to reclaim it. Instead, I had built something new, a version of life that was honest, grounded, and fully mine. There were still moments of reflection that caught me off guard. A familiar song, a scent, a street corner where Emily and I had once walked hand in hand. All of it stirred something deep inside me. But these moments no longer twisted into pain. They were simply reminders of a chapter that had ended, of experiences that had shaped me but no longer controlled me. And then came a subtle, almost surreal realization. I was grateful. Grateful for the clarity that betrayal forced upon me. Grateful for the lessons learned. Grateful for the resilience discovered in the aftermath. It was strange, even a little unsettling, to feel gratitude for something so painful. But I did, because without that crucible, I wouldn't have found the version of myself that I had fought so hard to reclaim. In the end, the story of betrayal was also a story of transformation. I had exposed Emily and Matt, yes, but more importantly, I had exposed myself to my own strength, my capacity for endurance, my ability to navigate heartbreak without losing my essence. I had transformed anger into clarity, pain into determination, betrayal into liberation. I still think about that anniversary party, the night I laid bare the betrayal in front of everyone. The memories are vivid, like old photographs etched into my mind. But the feeling now is not of hurt or revenge, it's of resolution. I understand that night as a turning point, a line in the sand. What happened to me could have destroyed me. But instead, I let it teach me, sharpen me, guide me toward a life that is authentically mine. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it awakens. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've ignored, the truths you've avoided, and the strength you never knew you had. It's brutal, yes, but it's also clarifying. It strips away the illusion of security and exposes what's real. I don't dwell on Emily or Matt anymore. Their chapters in my life are closed. I've moved forward, cautiously but fully, embracing new experiences, new relationships, and new opportunities. I've learned to value trust as a precious commodity, to give it wisely, and to guard my own integrity fiercely. And through it all, I've come to a place I never thought possible during those dark months. Peace. Standing on my balcony one evening, watching the city lights flicker like stars fall into earth, I realized something profound. Life doesn't always go as we plan. People we trust can betray us in ways we never imagined. But in the ruins of those betrayals, there is also potential. Potential for growth, for clarity, for reclaiming the narrative of our own lives. I smiled, a small, quiet smile. Not because the past was erased, it never could be, but because I had survived it, shaped it, and ultimately emerged stronger. The betrayal had been brutal, the pain undeniable, the humiliation public. Yet here I was, standing on the other side, intact, whole, and more myself than I had ever been. And that's the thing about life. It doesn't matter how deep the wound or how dark the night. The story doesn't end with the betrayal. The story ends with what you do next. For me, I chose to rise, and that choice made all the difference.